Welcome to episode number 5 of the Find Your Calling channel. In this episode, we're going to discover some key truths about calling and purpose as revealed by Jesus in the parable of the talents. These keys revolutionize my own understanding of how God designed us to discover our unique calling, and I think you'll find these principles tremendously helpful as well. Towards the end of this episode, I'm going to give you 2 questions that you can ask that will help propel you towards discovering your own unique calling. You'll definitely want to find out about that. So let's get started. In chapter 25 of the book of Matthew, Jesus tells various stories that illustrate what the kingdom of God is like. One of these stories is the parable of the talents. In this parable, a rich man is traveling to a far country and gives a portion of his wealth to a few servants in order for them to manage it while he's gone. The word talents here refers to an amount of money. The rich man returns sometime later and takes an account of each of these 3 servants. 2 have taken what the rich man entrusted to them and produced an increase. These 2 servants are commended. The 3rd servant was afraid and buried the rich man's money in the ground when he first received it. Upon the master's return, this servant simply gave back the original amount. This servant was punished for his failure to invest what he was entrusted with. I had often considered this passage in regards to calling and purpose, as it is frequently used in teachings and sermons on the topic. But in the light of my own personal journey of discovery, I now began to look at it in a new light. In all the years I had been familiar with this story, I had never observed the fact that the rich man in the story never told his servants what to do with the money that he entrusted to them. It was evident that he wanted them to use the money in a way that would produce an increase in his own wealth, but he wasn't specific about the activities that each was to pursue in order to make that happen. Furthermore, the story relates that the rich man had given them each a different amount of money according to their own abilities. A radical question began to circle around in my head. What if God's reason for not telling me specifically what to do with the gifts, talents, and abilities that he had given me was that he expected me to participate in the process of making that decision? What if God wanted me to help make the choice of what my calling would be? At first, this possibility was a troubling proposition. What if I made the wrong choice? What if I couldn't decide at all? After all, when God visits you in the form of a burning bush and tells you to go to Egypt and deliver the Israelites from bondage, you may be scared to death, but one thing you are not is uncertain about what God is asking you to do. But as I began to meditate on this question, I slowly transitioned from a place of fear to a place where this concept began to excite me. I had begun this journey at a place where my value and worth had been so tied up in this thing we call calling or purpose that I had been terrified of not knowing or not succeeding at whatever it was. But I had moved on from that place. My mindset had changed, and I had been marinating in God's unconditional love, independent of my performance or what I produced by my own efforts. And in that place, this question became liberating. As I studied and prayed and pondered the message of this parable, in the light of everything else God had been teaching me, I began to change how I looked at calling and purpose. I began to transition from a place of looking at the process of identifying my calling as a stress-inducing roadblock in my life, moving on to a new paradigm where God was a loving Father who had given his beloved child a set of building blocks in the form of gifts and talents, and was smiling as he stood back to see what his kid was going to build with them. I went from stressed out and fearful to being liberated, confident, and excited. With this change of mindset, I began to ask a new set of questions that ultimately led me to identify my own calling in life. Questions like, if I could name my own calling in life, what would it be? And given my own unique gifts, talents, and abilities, what do I find myself wanting to do with them? Once I began asking these questions in earnest, it didn't take me long to identify what I wanted my calling to be. I mentioned earlier that I had written a novel during this time of waiting. I had enjoyed the process immensely, and I felt fulfilled in using my creative abilities toward that end. What I didn't mention was that there was an aspect of my writing that was intricately tied to my faith in God. I had wanted to write a novel for a secular audience, not one which was overtly Christian, but which presented God in a favorable light, where the Christian characters were good, strong, moral people, instead of being the weak, ignorant, bigoted people that secular fiction often presents them to be. I'd wanted to write engaging and entertaining fiction that pointed people to God without being preachy, and which didn't contain the all too common expletive-laden sex fest that's rampant in much of secular fiction. As I contemplated the possibility that writing could be my calling, I felt all the pieces of the puzzle begin to fall into place. In the years that followed, I continued to write other works of fiction as well as nonfiction, and I experienced a growing sense of peace and contentment about my life that I'd never really known before. Before, as I previously detailed, although I had been at peace with knowing that I was a child of God, I remained anxious about the calling, but that anxiety was slowly replaced with peace, and I began thinking of ways that I could use my writing talent to make the world a better place and help build the kingdom of God. This new peace and contentment didn't develop overnight. Once I'd identified my own calling, I found that I began to pursue it in much the same way that I had pursued things in the past which I thought might be my calling. For a while, I felt I needed to achieve a certain level of notoriety or income or number of sales from my writing in order to prove that I was successfully living out my calling. I began comparing myself to others as a method of measuring my own efforts and success. However, over time, I worked through these issues and realized that whether or not I was a success at living out my own calling couldn't be determined that way. The more certain I became that I was doing the thing I'd been made to do, the less important the worldly markers of success in the writing field became. I still work hard at my craft and seek to sell books and grow my audience, but it's no longer because I need that validation to prove that what I'm doing is what I'm called to do, or to confirm that I'm a success at it. I can honestly say that my level of contentment with my calling has never been higher, and I'm excited about what the future holds as I continue to invest the gifts and talents that God has given me. Once I had completed my own journey of discovery and identified my own calling, I began to get a vision for helping others do the same. Why should others be forced to figure this whole thing out on their own when I could help them by sharing the insights and lessons that I had learned in my own journey? That's when I began taking notes and preparing to write my first book on this topic, Find Your Calling Without Losing Your Mind. I firmly believe that God orchestrated my journey. While I was doubting and frustrated and feeling lost, God was gently leading me through the events of my life to a place where I'd be able to receive the truth and finally believe it. I had to go through what I did in order to really internalize the truths that I needed to understand so that I could be set free. Like me, you were also created for a unique purpose that only you can fulfill at this time and place in history. I'm honored and excited to help you in the process of identifying exactly what your unique calling is, so that you too can find the fulfillment in life that God designed you to experience as you bless the world by living out your calling. Over the next 2 episodes, I'll be sharing 7 keys that will help streamline your journey to discover your own unique calling in life. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can find out when future episodes are released. If you want additional resources to help you in your journey, I encourage you to consider picking up the 2 books I've written on this topic, Find Your Calling Without Losing Your Mind, and Overcome the Obstacles and Succeed at Your Calling. Purchase links for both books are available in the show notes below. If you find the information on these videos helpful, please share these thoughts with your friends via social media. Thanks for watching, and may God bless your day.